Hello, feral friends and fellow nature nerds, and thank you for tuning in to this, the 61st episode of Dirt Dispatches. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara. So, a couple of episodes back, I told you about the book I had received, Michigan Wildlife Sketches, the native mammals of Michigan's forests, fields, and marshes. Now, in case you missed it or you've forgotten, this book was published by the Michigan Department of Natural Resources in September of 1972. And in addition to literal sketches of various animals, it includes descriptions and information about these animals. But what makes this book so fun to read is that in some cases, the description of the animal is wildly subjective. Last time I talked about this book, I shared the 1972 Michigan DNR's opinion of opossums, which basically held that they were some of the stupidest animals around and had only managed to survive as a species for the last, 20 million years or so through a combination of a high reproductive rate and sheer dumb luck. Now, opossums aren't exactly a controversial animal. They don't inspire a lot of animosity from humans, except on the few occasions when they get into the trash can or raid the chicken coop. And because of that, they also don't become a big political issue like, say, wolves, and to a lesser extent, coyotes. So that got me wondering, what was the Michigan DNR's attitude towards wolves and coyotes in 1972? So that's what we're going to look at today, because in Michigan Wildlife Sketches, they just kind of lump them together in the same section. But before we get into what the DNR had to say in 1972 about wolves and coyotes, let's put this into a quick historical perspective. Wolves had been extirpated from Michigan's Lower Peninsula by 1935. In 1959, the state bounty on wolves was repealed, but even then, the last known litter of pups, excluding those living on Isle Royale National Park, had been born somewhere between 1954 and 1956. Bounty records from the years leading up to the repeal tell the tale of a declining wolf population. In 1956, 30 wolves were killed for the bounty. In 1958, just 7, and in 1951, only a single one. So when the bounty was repealed, there really wasn't much left to protect. And it wasn't until 1965 that they were granted full legal protection under state law. And keep in mind that Michigan Wildlife Sketches was published the year before the Endangered Species Act was signed into law, making wolves a federally protected species. So when Michigan Wildlife Sketches was published, there were very few wolves remaining in the state and no known litters of new pups born in almost 20 years. The wolves that were in the Upper Peninsula at the time had probably come in from Wisconsin or Canada and were thought to be unmated individuals. It would be nearly another 20 years until wolves once again started to breed in the state. So let's see what Michigan Wildlife Sketches had to say. The chapter is titled Wolf and Coyote, Wild Dogs of the Forest and Plains. It is not a flight of fancy to speak of wolves and coyotes as wild dogs, since they are, in truth, just that. All of our domestic breeds of dog not only belong to the same family, Canidae, but also to the same genus, Canis, as do the wolf and the coyote. Only in the species name do domestic dogs and wild dogs differ in scientific classification. There might even be some question about the species differentiation, since dogs, wolves, and coyotes are able to breed together, and the hybrids so produced are also fertile. In fact, the famous husky dog of Alaska is a hybrid, part wolf, part dog. The wolf is one of the best advertised creatures in existence, having been the subject of folklore, hunting legend, and outdoor story from time immemorial. Some of his alleged characteristics are even translated or perhaps parodied in slang to designate humans, as, for example, we speak of a wolf of Wall Street, or more familiarly, a wolf in affairs with the opposite sex. Needless to say, both of these types are unfair to, quote, canine union number 1, unquote, the true wolves. Moving on, the next section is titled Wolf Has Several Alibis. The wolves of North America, while differing in size and color in various parts of the continent, are on the whole very similar in characteristics and are much more nearly alike than are the many varieties of domestic dog. Like so many other notorious characters, the wolf is known under several aliases. Among them are gray wolf, timber wolf, buffalo wolf, lobo, big wolf, and northern wolf. Okay, let's pause for a second, because what I find interesting here is that one of the criticisms by opponents of the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone National Park in the late 90s is that the quote unquote wrong subspecies of wolf was used, that the wolves used in the reintroduction were somehow bigger or more aggressive. And even in 1972, the Michigan DNR got this one right. All right, moving along. In general, with the exception of the huge wolves of Alaska, wolves run about 3.5 feet in length, excluding the somewhat bushy tails, and weigh up to 100 pounds. An adult wolf is, of course, a formidable creature, and very few dogs stand a chance against a wolf in open combat. Wolves do not breed until they are 2 or 3 years old. In Michigan, they mate for the season and possibly longer in late January or February. The gestation period is about 9 weeks. The den may be any suitable shelter, such as a cave, hollow log, or ground den. 3 to a dozen whelps may be born, but usually only 2 or 3 survive to maturity. So again, the Michigan DNR gets it right. A dozen pups is somewhat unusual, but it can happen. And the mortality rate for wolf pups is somewhere in the range of 60 to 80%. With starvation being the number one killer. It continues on. In spring and summer, small prey is abundant, and the wolves wandering about by day and night easily pick up a good living and grow fat, lazy, and good-natured. As summer closes and the whelps grow, the parents take them on hunting excursions and show them what is good to eat and how to hunt for it. With the onset of winter, hard times also set in. The small creatures disappear, and wolves must call upon their strength and intelligence to outwit and overcome the larger animals upon which they now prey. The peaceable disposition of summer changes as snow fills the forest, cold gales moan through the trees, the long cold nights enshroud an almost dead world. Then hungry ferocity, crafty patience, and daring make the wolf a formidable foe to everything which roams the forest. It is at this season that wolves travel in packs and assist each other in capturing prey. The endurance of the wolf is amazing, yet most deer, antelope, and horses can outspeed and outswim them, and would usually escape from a single wolf. Therefore, 2, or sometimes several, unite, and by relieving one another, cutting across and heading off the prey, more than make up for their lack of individual speed. Yeah, okay, I've never read any other source that indicates wolves consume more small game in the summer and big game in the winter, or that they're more peaceful in the summer and ferocious in the winter, or that they hunt more in packs in the winter. I suspect that this is a projection of human expectations onto the wolf. But the real question is, do we humans need to be afraid? Let's see what the DNR said in 1972. Whether or not wolves are dangerous to man has been debated for centuries. Much exaggeration has crept into the popular history of wolves, from the superstitious tales of old to the stirring stories of modern adventurers. While it must be considered doubtful that wolves will attack man today, even in the wildest parts of this continent, it is likely that they did so in more primitive times. The wolf is an intelligent animal, and modern man is the most dangerous creature on earth. Wolves have come to know that man is the untouchable, whose very presence is a peril, and experiences of various people in northern Canada indicate that wolves will not attack a lone man, even under apparently extreme provocation. But early man, armed with clubs, spears, or bows, was quite a different proposition, and many tales of wolves attacking and killing lone persons, or even small groups in northern Canada or Siberia, seem well authenticated. Nevertheless, far more people have been scared than have been hurt, and that mainly by the terrific howling which multiplies itself in echoing volume until it sounds as if the woods are full of wolves. Gotta say, I'm impressed and a little bit surprised. I expected wolves to be vilified more, and instead I was met with a fairly realistic portrayal of the risk that wolves pose to people. Although I will say that I don't believe that wolves think of people as untouchable. I suspect that they just don't see us as prey. And in fact, from what I've read in other sources, our upright two legged posture makes us look like bears to a lot of animals, so they tend to avoid us. All right, the final section on wolves is titled Few Wolves Left in Michigan. Wolves are still found in small numbers in the wilder parts of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Probably fewer than 50 wolves remain in the entire state, including about 20 on Isle Royale. They do little damage to livestock since their present habitat is far from regions where much stock is raised. They do kill a few deer, but with deer too abundant for the winter range to support in so many places, this cannot be held seriously against them. So, a quick word here 50 was probably a generous estimate for 1972. Other sources put the number of wolves in Michigan's Upper Peninsula when the Endangered Species Act became law, excluding Isle Royale, at less than 10. And while people currently like to blame a lack of deer in the UP for the return of wolves, even the Michigan DNR says that winter severity and forest management practices are a much bigger driver of deer population than predation by wolves. This section continues. We are fortunate to have the Isle Royale National Park, where it is possible that wolves can continue to exist despite the encroachments of civilization. To many people, the North means more than merely a place where deer, grouse, and trout can be readily transferred from the woods and streams to the bag or creel. The splash of a beaver tail in a quiet lake, a porcupine ambling along a woods trail, a bear lunching among the thimbleberry bushes, and above all, a wolf howl in the night are equally important components of the North Country, and it will be a melancholy day when the last Michigan wolf has been killed. These aesthetic values have finally been recognized with action by the legislature to remove the wolf bounty in 1959 and place the wolf under full legal protection in 1965. My, how times have changed. In 1972, the Michigan DNR had a pretty positive opinion of wolves, but this attitude unfortunately seems to have changed over the years. In 2019, the Michigan DNR admitted that 3 years prior, in 2016, they exaggerated reports of wolf behavior and outright lied about others to justify killing a pack that had preyed on a cow on a prominent ranch in the UP. Kind of a surprise that they're still realistic about the drivers of deer population. Now, this chapter ends with a short discussion of coyotes, and it's titled Coyote Expands Its Range Numbers. If the big timber wolf is in danger of extermination, the same cannot be said for his smaller cousin, the brush wolf or coyote. The coyote is considerably smaller than the wolf and can also be readily distinguished from the latter by the way in which he carries his tail. When running, the coyote carries his tail well down, not high up as does the wolf. There is much color variation among coyotes, from nearly white to nearly black, with varying proportions of yellowish and tawny. The coyote is less majestic and imposing than the wolf, but much better adapted to life in the modern, so-called civilized world. The wolf retreats before man, and his habitat is continually shrinking. The coyote welcomes man with his agriculture and attendant changes, and has expanded his range and his numbers in recent years. Brushy cover, cut-over lands, abandoned agricultural areas are happy hunting grounds for the coyote. He is just a wild dog and likes most everything to eat that a dog does. Mice, rats, ground squirrels, and birds are his natural foods. But these are eagerly supplemented by poultry and young livestock when man so generously breeds them and turns them out to roam in coyote territory. Livestock corralled or stabled at night suffers little from coyote depredations, but it is not always practicable to handle stock in this way. Poultry, however, can be kept out of reach of coyotes and foxes if properly cared for. Much of the damage laid to the coyote is done by dogs, but certainly the animal cannot be whitewashed. He is not suitable company for poultry, sheep, or calves, and should be controlled in agricultural areas. In areas where stock is not a major interest or where stock can be protected, the coyote probably does more good as a rodent controller and scavenger than he does harm to game. Again, I'm pleasantly surprised that coyotes are not vilified. And with the idea that it's easy to protect livestock from coyotes. I think my favorite sentence in this whole chapter is, but these are eagerly supplemented by poultry and young livestock when man so generously breeds them and turns them out to roam in coyote territory. The final paragraph of this chapter is remarkably complimentary of coyotes. It is scarcely necessary to worry about his extermination, for he is too clever and adaptable to be in danger. We should not fall into the error so often seen in print that the coyote is a miserable, cowardly rascal worthy of only contempt. He is a rather handsome, courageous, and clever creature who is far too smart to fight against hopeless odds. How many men would pit a valued dog against a coyote of equal weight, and how many men would care to step into an enclosure unarmed to try conclusions with an adult coyote, regardless of weight? Not quite sure about that last sentence, but the rest of it I really liked. So while I took some issue with the author's depiction of opossums being stupid, I have to say I was pretty impressed with the fairly accurate and surprisingly complimentary description of wolves and coyotes. Now, if we can just re-inject that 1972 attitude about these amazing animals into various departments of natural resources around the country. If we did that, we'd all be in good shape. And on that note, my feral friends, we're going to wrap this one up. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to support the podcast, here's how you can do that. Become a patron. Subscriptions start at just $5 a month, and with 3 paid months, you get some very cool Dispatches from the Forest merch. You can find all the details at patreon.com/dispatches from the forest. You can donate using PayPal or Venmo and my email address, dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com. You can also use that address to email me if you have any questions, comments, or requests for future episodes. You can donate using the Cash App and the hashtag #ForestNerd. If you prefer to send a check, send me a message and I'll provide you with my mailing address. Check out the merch store at cafepress.com/shop/dispatches from the forest. Click on products and find something you like. Finally, follow Dispatches from the Forest on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty. Dispatches from the Forest recognizes that the lands where we live, work, and recreate are the traditional homelands of the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho people. We understand that this land holds immense significance for the original stewards, Native nations, and peoples of this region. Dirt Dispatches is a production of Dispatches from the Forest and may not be used or rebroadcast whole or in part without express written permission.